Ready. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our 11th Ask Me Anything live video series. If you missed the 10th AMA on what it means to be an immigrant business owner, you can still see it on HIAS Pennsylvania's YouTube page, on our website, www.hiaspa.org, and in the video section of HIAS Pennsylvania's Facebook page. My name is Cathryn Miller-Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide legal and social services to immigrants and refugees. Today, our conversation will focus on the racist underpinnings of immigration law. Beginning in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act, through last month's proposed asylum ban focusing on Latin American migrants, immigration policy in the United States has consistently focused on who to keep out, resting our policies on the, quote, immigrant as burden, unquote, narrative, rather than recognizing that immigrants contribute way more than they take and have repeatedly been the reason for our success. Not only have our policies been based on false narratives about immigrants generally, but they have more specifically also been based on false narratives that are race-based. Thank you to everyone who has submitted questions already. We're excited for our conversation today. If you haven't already done so, please submit any questions you have during the next half hour in the comments section below. If we don't get to them during this live conversation, we'll answer them in the comments. We would also love to hear your ideas on topics for future videos. We hope that through this video series, you can ask any questions you have and learn the truth about immigration and refugee resettlement in the U.S. Today, we're excited to be speaking about how racism has shaped immigration law with Professor Fernando Chang-Muy. Professor Chang-Muy is the Thomas O'Boyle Lecturer in Law at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law, where he teaches refugee law and policy and lectures on immigration and social work at the Graduate School of Social Policy and Practice. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with a question from me. What were the first U.S. immigration laws, and what was the guiding principle behind them?
Great. So I want to cancel my street cred. I'm not an immigration historian like you, Kathy. I'm a current immigration person, and I do teach immigration law. However, on the first day of class, I try to do what I'm going to do today in 29 minutes, which is talk about context and history, but I'm not an immigration historian. Now, Kathy, at the beginning, you said that beginning in 1882, there's the Chinese Exclusion Act. So to your question, actually, even before the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, whereby Congress excluded Chinese, we've had a history of excluding people based on their race or ethnicity. So, for example, in the first class of a 14-week immigration course, I say this: class, who do you think said this? Those Germans, they're dirty and hairy. The word was hirsute. We can't speak to them from the pulpit nor from the press. They don't speak our language. Let's get rid of them, those Germans. Class, who do you think said this? People raise their hand: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. The answer is, class, Benjamin Franklin, the founder of the University of Pennsylvania, where you are now sitting. So the point I'm trying to make, that even from the beginning of even when the colonies were colonies, we did not like certain people. Now, Franklin did later on say they're good farmers, they're not all bad. And so we hear that rhetoric over and over again. So before 1882, so we start with 1750s when Franklin said this. Then in the 1790s, we have the Nationality Act, which said if you're a free white man, you can become a citizen. And then moving on in time, in 1819, we have Irish, Germans, and Swedes coming, arriving sick, almost dying. By the way, today we have Hondurans and Mexicans arriving sick and almost dying. So those of us with Irish, German, and Swedish heritage might try to remember that our own ancestors arrived on boats, dying and sick. And of course, there's a whole cohort of people who did not even want to come here. And those are people from Africa, specifically originally from West Africa. And the census in the 1750s revealed that about 500,000 people of African heritage resided in the colonies or the United States of America. And then how you started this chat, Kathy, then finally in 1882, Congress passes a law that specifically targets people based on their race, and that is the Chinese race, because there was a perception, of course, a lot of it is perception, that Chinese are coming, they're driving down our wages, and we're hearing that same rhetoric today in 2021. So just history keeps it repeating itself. So beginning with Benjamin Franklin to the present, we have a history of not wanting the other.
Thanks. And can you tell us a little bit about the 1924 Johnson-Reed Immigration Act?
Sure. So it preferenced people from three main European countries, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Germany. So although we started out hating Germans, people of German heritage and Irish and England, Britain, finally came. So if you're from there, come on in. There was national quotas set up. But if you're from Asia, even though we passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, in case you didn't get it, we're going to exclude you. We're going to pass another law that's almost repetitive, but it added Japan and it added the Philippines. So again, the 1924 the Johnson Act again excluded people from Asia. If HIAS and if we were chatting in California, more Californians might know about this than people on the East Coast, because California is now full of Asians and there's Asian American studies all over the place in California. But it's good that you're asking, because this adds context to where we are today. We don't like the Germans, let's not let them come in. We don't like the Irish and Germans, they're dirty, they're tired, they're arriving on boats, they're spreading disease, let's not let them come in. We don't like the Chinese, let's not let them come in. Asians, we don't like Japanese, we don't like them in. And by the way, if they're here, even though they're third generation, in the World War II, as you know, Americans of Japanese heritage were put in camps in the West. And so even though these were Americans, there was still racial animus against people who didn't look white, I guess.
Thanks. And so I think, my next question is, you kind of in a way already answered, but it's how have these precedents shaped the immigration policy that followed it? As you pointed out, from the very beginning, 1750, before we were even officially our own nation, we had these kind of race comments, race and ethnicity.
Yeah, but it's not all been about exclusion. It's also been about bringing them in when we needed them. Mm-hmm. So for the viewers or listeners who speak Spanish, brazo means arm. So in the 40s, we needed arms. We needed arms to pick blueberries, arms to pick tomatoes. We needed hands to pick apples in New England. And so because there were no Native Americans, not Native American Indians, but natives, who wanted to get their hands shitty with dirt, we imported people from Canada, from Bermuda, from the Bahamas, and from Mexico, and that program was called the Bracero program, where we brought them in, and then we wanted to kick them out. By the way, the same thing happened in France. The French brought in people from their former colonies, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and then after they built their roads, they wanted to send them back. And that is costing a lot. And then they're still not accepted today. Not that I should be throwing stones at another country, but that is fomenting a lot of internal strife in France to date. And to date, as we can see with such polarization, there is still the feeling that those people are taking jobs away from us. But we're bringing them in. The Bracero program is an example of us wanting to bring in people to do work that we don't want to do. And by the way, race, ethnicity, and religion are all wrapped up as you working with HIAS, which used to stand for Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society.
Still does.
Famous movie, Voyage of the Damned. Mm-hmm. In the late 30s, Germans of Jewish heritage got on a boat, knowing what was about to come, going to Cuba. Cuba did not let them in, tries to land in Miami, tries to land in the port of Philadelphia, a few blocks away from here. Finally, some of the European countries did say, you can land in our ports in the UK, etc. But again, it's race, it's religion, it's all that wrapped up, and that is the history of the immigration, our current immigration policy. By the way, we had nationality quotas, as we talked about a few minutes ago, and then and as a response to that, we got rid of that. But then we put in a more neutral sounding law in the 60s, and that is the family-based petitions. So if you have a mother, father, brother, sister, or husband or wife, you can sponsor them. So on its face, that sounds equal, but who was here in the 60s? It was mainly Europeans. And so if I am Italian, I can bring in my mama, who I left behind in Italy. So great, the family preference system worked well in the beginning. And now there's griping and moaning that no, those Africans, those Asians are bringing their mother and father, and it's resulting in chain migration. But, chain migration, it's very interesting that this administration is using chain migration because, as you know, once upon a time, there's a young woman who comes to the U.S. to be a model. Mm-hmm. She then marries an American man. She then becomes a lawful permanent resident. She then becomes a citizen, and she sponsors her parents from Eastern Europe. My name is Melania. That is chain migration, mm-hmm. otherwise known as family reunification. So this administration, which hypocritically criticizes family reunification / chain migration, in his own family, this is happening.
Yeah. Well, that's so helpful because I think it really points out so clearly, what we see as, just immigration shifts and policy and changes, things that happen, the world revolves, the world changes. When you really see the broader historical context, what you see are, in fact, the patterns, not the changes. The patterns are bring in people of a different race and religion to do your labor and then kick them out. Or
not even let them in.
Right.
Or not even let them in.
Class status.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And create policies that ensure the supremacy of one race, one, kind of sort of continent, if you will, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's really, when you look at the lens of history, it's really, really stark. Even the braceros that you talk about, it reminds me, certainly the braceros are paid for their labor, but we bring them in to do the jobs that we don't want to do. So what does that sound like? That sounds like the original immigrants who were brought in against their will, right?
Yes.
And so the fact that braceros are paid, of course, makes it not slavery, but the treatment is the same. Second-class citizen, come in and do our dirty work for us, come in and remain in an exploitable position so that, we can continue to use you how we want and not allow you to gain any kind of power. Because, of course, braceros don't have a pathway to citizenship, right?
Yeah. And, I don't know if you've invited another colleague here in Philadelphia, Meredith Rapkin, mm-hmm. who used to work at HIAS, mm-hmm. And her organization, Justice at Work, focuses on agricultural workers. Right. And she could tell you horror stories of how agricultural workers are paid, mm-hmm. but there are a lot of rights in housing issues, pesticide issues, and they have no rights. And that is, again, to your point, another example of we bring in people we need, mm-hmm. and we exploit them. And we've gone up to 1940s, 1960s with the family reunification petition, and moving on in time, the differential based on race, when I was working in the 1990s with the UN Refugee Agency, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, there was a war going on in what's called Yugoslavia. and there were wars, civil wars also going on in parts of Africa. We brought in refugees from Yugoslavia, and yet we did not bring in refugees from Africa. However, the two demographics had the same characteristics. They were farmer Yugoslavians who didn't speak English, and there were farmer Rwandans who didn't speak English, and they were both needy. Both groups were needy, and both groups were vulnerable. We bring in the European Yugoslavians, and we put them provisionally in empty army barracks in New Jersey to house them, and then we ask organizations like HIAS, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Lutherans, to resettle them. The people with the same attributes, same characteristics in Africa, we did not bring in. So I'm asking myself, what's the difference? Same thing and closer to home in the Atlantic Ocean. You have Haitians leaving a bad system, getting on rickety boats, and we have Cubans who phenotypically look white, get on boats, leaving also a bad regime. The Coast Guard picks up the Cubans and puts them on the Coast Guard ship and then brings them to Key West. And then the Coast Guard puts the Haitians also on the Coast Guard ship, drowns their little rickety thing, but then takes them back to Haiti. Haitians are black, Cubans are white passing. And of course, there was a law that protected Cubans, but because they were coming from communist countries and we hate communism. So again, from the Germans down to the Irish, down to the Chinese, to the Japanese, to the 1924 Johnson Act, to Jews, to Mexicans. I mean, this is law after law after law. And so today, the administration is passing both law as well as walls. And some of these laws are functioning as walls to prevent needy, vulnerable people from getting protection in the United States. And thankfully, there are organizations like HIAS and the American Civil Liberties Union and other organizations that are filing lawsuits using human rights principles and, of course, using United States Constitution to challenge these laws that are stopping. And, the sad thing is that, as we have talked about in the last 20 minutes or so, we all descend from people from over there, from Ireland, from Germany, from Russia, etc. And we forget our ancestors, and now we want to close the door. Even though our own ancestors were smelly, were sick, and were dying. And today we don't want those kinds of people from coming in.
Right. So we did get a question from a listener, Milani. She says the 1965 immigration law, which rid us of the racist quota system, was supposed to equalize things. More people from more countries were allowed to legally, permanently immigrate to the U.S., resulting in significant demographic change. However, at the same time, illegal immigration, especially of Mexicans and Latin Americans, grew, especially during the 90s, 2000s. And they now comprise the bulk of the undocumented population. Why is this the case if everyone from all countries, theoretically since 1965, has had an equal chance of legally immigrating to the U.S., and Mexicans, Latin Americans have made up a large proportion of those awarded green cards each year? What changes in the law do you think would be necessary to reduce illegal immigration?
Yeah. Huge question. Let me be simplistic. People are going to kill me for this. It's capitalism. So there's lots of poverty in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico. Some social scientists, and I'm not that person, say that a lot of that has been actually the U.S. exploiting of those countries. And so if you are a Honduran farmer and the U.S. government is paying your military to quash you and there's no support in infrastructure, and by the way, your own government is shitty, you're going to leave and you're going to try to come here. And then we exploit you. But, to your point, you're right. As we mentioned earlier, the 1965 immigration law, which set out this preference system, was supposed to be a response to the racist national quota law of 24, But as we've mentioned, the people who were here then were mainly of European heritage. As time passes, the Mexican comes in, maybe gets sponsored by a chicken poultry farm, gets his green card, and then he starts bringing in his wife or his kids who we left behind. And now the demographics of the United States are changing, but not totally. And then because of the economic situation in Central America, which I have just said, some people say the United States is also partly responsible for their travails, are then forced to leave. And because the laws, if you want to come in based on a family petition, there's a lot of money to pay. So if you're making $5 an hour, $6 an hour as a dishwasher in a restaurant in Philadelphia, and you have a green card, congratulations. Where are you going to get the money, the filing fee, and the proof that you can support your sister who you want to bring in who is left behind in Mexico? So the filing fees, what's going on in the country of origin, what's going on in this country and what we're doing to that country, the filing fees that we are charging people makes it difficult for people to wait. Hence, they're trying to get in without papers, to use your language. They're coming in illegally. The Quakers have said, by the way, and the headquarters of the social action arm of the Quakers is here in Philadelphia, the American Friends Service Committee. They have said that no human being is illegal. The only difference between you and me is papers. You have a paper known as a birth certificate. I don't have a paper, a U.S. birth certificate, but the only difference between you and me is documents. I'm not illegal and neither are you. So anyway, so it's very complicated, but it's all of those things wrapped into one, resulting in why people might want to come here and not wait legally to be sponsored. The filing fee, the horrible situation in my house, in my home, the fact that you, the United States government, have exploited and built wells and not paid me a reasonable amount, all those reasons are resulting in people trying to cross the border and not doing it the legal kosher way, if you will.
I also just want to thank you. I want to just follow up with that as well. You know, the last question Malini had asked is, what changes in the law do you think would be necessary to reduce illegal immigration? And I want to just share, you know, based on what Professor Chang-Muy has explained to us, the changes that are necessary to reduce illegal immigration are to make much more migration legal. So it's not, I mean, I know that the debate that is often focused on in the media is about how to keep people from coming. But if there's anything that we hope our audience takes away from this conversation is it's the understanding that there isn't a problem with people coming. The problem is with our nation making laws that people then can't live with and are put into an exploitable situation because of the law. So the way to fix it is to make the law more recognizing more the need for immigrants and the need for stability and unexploitability.
Yes.
And creating a situation where people can enter and thrive as opposed to being forced to not thrive.
And to leave.
Right.
Yeah, so it's both sides of the same coin. What can we
Right.
do? And we should be the only ones doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But what can we do to make the country of origin better so that people don't leave? And what can we not do to make that country worse? Mm-hmm. So what's going on in the country of origin that makes you happy? If you're happy if 1890 England is poor, there's shit in the street, there's exploitation of children, you're going to get on a boat and you're going to come to Ellis Island. So what were the root causes that drove Europeans out? Can we improve that? And what are the root causes in Central America and South America, our closest neighbors, that are driving people out, causing them to come? So let's talk about that, not today. And then to your point, Kathy, what can we do once people are here to make their lives better? And I like the use of the word problem. James Baldwin, in the 20s and 30s expatriated himself to France. And someone said, could you talk to us about the problem of the Negro in America? He said, actually, we don't have a problem. The problem is the non-blacks who have a problem with us. So it's shifting it. So it's not a problem of the newcomer. It's a problem with us and the ways our laws are constructed and the ways their countries are screwed up, in part due to us as well. And so what can we do at both ends, on their end and our end, to make people, to have people live lives with dignity?
Great. I wanted to ask, I think we have time for one more question. Are there immigration laws that aren't based on race?
That is a whole nother 25 minutes or, 500 hours. So, remember high school biology where you dissected the frog? Mm-hmm. You dissect this part, that part, that part, that part. We could also go to all the component parts of the immigration law, the non-immigrant parts. Is there any part of the way that we allow non-immigrants to come in that can be race neutral? Then let's go to what we've been talking about a lot in this chat, the family reunification ways I can sponsor my mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife. Is that truly race neutral? Employment. I'm Apple Computer. I am Starbucks. It sounds neutral. The big old conglomerate, can sponsor a nurse from the Philippines. Is that race neutral? Reasons we use to exclude people, reasons we use to deport people, the way that we can become a United States citizen demanding that we all be able to speak English and know American civics. Is that race neutral? So that's an interesting question, is could there be an immigration law that right now parts of it sound like they're race neutral, but are they really? And that would be an interesting course to teach, and that would be an interesting question to explore.
Great. And so I suppose, I had one more question. Can you give an example of a future immigration policy without racial underpinnings? And I'm going to guess that your response is not quickly.
All of that. All of that.
Right.
So, the diversity visa program, which was started by Senator Kennedy, reminding us of his brother, John F. Kennedy, who said, America's a land of immigrants. He said, I'd like to pass a law, please vote on it when I get up on the floor, to diversify this wonderful country of ours. Great. When the diversity visa program, which in the streets we call the lottery program, got started, half of the numbers allotted were for people from Ireland, which were his constituents from Massachusetts. And then, that portion of the law was erased. But then there still said anybody from anywhere in the world can apply. Liechtenstein, Germany, Monaco. However, if you're from India, Mexico, China, the Philippines, we already have too many of you. Don't bother putting your name in the envelope and sending it to Washington, D.C. And so that was an attempt to diversify and unracialize, but even then, at its beginnings, it was racialized, giving preference to people from Ireland. So again, great question. Can we have a totally neutral law that by either on its face or in its impact is racially neutral? I need to think about that.
That's fair enough. Okay, so we have one more minute, and I'm trying to think of a question where we could have a pithy answer. It's so hard because this is such a complex area.
I can tell you, I can ask the listeners, should you be young or not, the pithy thing to say is to vote. I don't know if this is recorded and it'll live on for posterity, maybe not, but
Definitely.
We are recording this in July of 2020.
Right.
And for the 2 or 3 months that are left, for young people watching, if you've not yet registered to vote, we urge you to vote. If you like the current immigration policies, then vote for the current administration. If you think that the current immigration policies, which are banning people of Muslim heritage, which are allowing low-income people to come in and ask for asylum, which did not want people from China to come in, even though they're bringing in their talents and their money to universities. If you don't like the way that we're treating people and the building of the walls, then I would urge you to vote for a new and more compassionate administration.
Well, good. On that note, thank you so much, Professor Chang-Muy, for those enlightening answers. So we have run out of time. And for all of you who sent questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, they'll be answered in the comments below. Stay tuned for HIAS Pennsylvania's next Ask Me Anything in August as we discuss the intersection between immigration and mass incarceration. As always, you can learn more about how to support DACA recipients, asylum seekers, and other immigrants and refugees at www.hiaspa.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.